Hey, hello everyone. This is The Last Nighters, and we're going to be talking about The Last Supper. The Last Nighters on The Last Supper. Last Supper on The Last Nighters. This is episode 13. Can be found at lastnighters.com/13. And I am Daniel, and my co-host is Robert. How you doing?
Hey, everybody. Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Hey.
What's up? How you doing?
So we're going to talk about The Last Supper, and here's the Google information. Came out in 1995, drama, parody film, hour and a half, plus 4 minutes. 6.8 on the IMDb, 63% Rotten Tomatoes. Roger Ebert gave it 3 out of 4 stars and had a very interesting review, which I do want to talk with you about a little bit. And 84% of Google users like it. And here's the description. Stranded student Pete, played by Ron Eldard, gets a lift from racist trucker Zach and repays the favor by inviting him in for dinner with his roommates, Jude, Luke, Mark, and Polly, played by Cameron Diaz, Courtney Vance, Jonathan Penner, and Annabeth Gish. When Zach praises Hitler and pulls a knife at the table, the roommates kill him. Rationalizing their actions as a favor to humanity, they bury Zach in the yard and begin to invite other offensive types to a string of similarly murderous meals. Came out April 5th, 1996. 1996, 1996. That's when I graduated from the old hike school. Don't you ever say that. Don't you ever say that. Director Stacy Title, box office about $500,000, but I think that this was one of those like minor movies, like I don't know, movie house kind of things, or what would you call that? Like limited release kind of deals, like Sundance or something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of art housey, but maybe a little more mainstream than art house. I don't know exactly what you'd call it. I think it's interesting that they call it drama parody. I don't know what it's a parody of.
Yeah, well, I think it, that's the Google.
Except a good movie.
Haha. Robert, playing his card early here. Well, what do you think of the description so far?
Oh, yeah, it's accurate. Fairly detailed description. That's exactly the entire damn movie. I mean, I would have written it a little bit different. I would have written, what if Antifa invited people over for dinner? But at least these guys want to have a conversation, because generally if it's Antifa, the bike lock would be the hors d'oeuvre. I don't know, something like that. Except they straight murder you if they even don't like your opinion on one thing.
Yes. And it didn't seem like they were all that keen on actually giving them too much of an opportunity. It seemed like they slid very quickly into, as soon as they said the wrong thing, it's game over. Yeah, they really got comfortable with murder really quickly and seemed to revel in it, and really kind of ex post facto justified their, kind of like passed themselves off as heroes, and what they had done was really not even that horrible. I mean, could be argued that the first kill was in self-defense. I mean, the guy was kind of just making a point, but he was doing it in a very threatening way. But then they very quickly kind of justified any kind of, instead of just saying, well, it was self-defense, and they went on to lionize themselves as heroes. And every time that they wanted to kill somebody, man, they're saving the world from a lot of Hitlers, apparently. Yeah, everyone's Hitler.
So many Hitlers.
Yeah,
and I know the left thinks everybody that disagrees with them is literally Hitler, but that's what this movie is. So I guess in that way it's fairly accurate. Yeah,
it's very prescient, because this is well before social media, and now the name Hitler or being called a Nazi is like on the menu, right? Everyone's a Nazi, everyone's Hitler. Trump is literally Hitler, but give him all the guns. So logically consistent and thinking these people are not. These angry feminists, and I say that as if there is some other kind. Quote from the movie. By the great Ron Perlman. I think he steals every scene in this movie, especially just in his little TV interludes, and then at the end, of course, when he stumps them when they try to kill him. But I did want to ask you.
And after that, they were the main guy. I forget his name. I forget all their names. So I'm just going to say the black dude. But he was like, no, man, he's playing you. He's playing us. It's a rehearsed act. He's just an Iceman, because he was just so invested in their murder plot that they were just such heroes. Anyway, it was all super disgusting. It was an interesting kind of character study, but I wouldn't call this like a real movie with characters that you care about. Anyway, I don't want to derail you, Daniel. We'll get into that later. What do you want to say?
Well, I wanted to point out just a couple of things from early on. So they are playing the Ron Perlman's show on the TV, and they're like, oh, I'm so sick of hearing this guy, I want to turn it off. Or, no, I want to keep watching. And somebody says, well, it's my TV, so we're turning it off. And I was like, property rights, baby, right there.
Yeah, and I was kind of going, oh, well, they believe in property rights. Huh, that's weird.
Yeah, that was weird. So let's talk about the very first kill, because you kind of opened that you thought it was kind of self-defense, and I'm just curious if we could talk through it a little bit, because I found it a little bit ambiguous.
It's definitely ambiguous.
Further, I didn't particularly, and I want to be delicate here, but I didn't particularly find him to be overly offensive. I felt like the grad students were being mean to him, rude to him, trying to goad him, trying to like upset him in some way, and they were trying to push buttons, you know?
Here's what I wrote. Bill Paxton is right more than he's wrong. He's wrong with the wars and the racism, but he's right about the grad student protesters.
Right, yeah, and he essentially gives them the idea. It's like, you guys don't ever fucking do anything. All you do is, buy animal-free, cruelty-free whatever, or protest, but you don't actually take action and get anything done. And
right.
It essentially gives them the idea that, well, it plants a seed, right? And oddly enough, that gardening is the other half of the movie. But the thing I found interesting is he wasn't even allowed to say what he thought Hitler had the right idea on, because then they drove it into the one guy was Jewish, and that became the issue, right? Right.
So you could say, well, I agree with Hitler on this one thing, and then everybody gets upset and goes, you agree about something Hitler said? And, not everybody is a full-time monster. I just want to say this. I bet you everybody, on the planet all agrees that chocolate is tasty or whatever. I mean, you could agree with Hitler because you both like chocolate or something. I mean, you're right. He didn't get an example or a chance to explain what it was, and then it quickly became about Jews and whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's, of course, by design. They didn't want to, let on what it was. But I could surmise from the guy, like you were saying, he's right more than he's wrong, but he's wrong on a couple of things. And one of them was, patriotism and the rah-rah. And I think that he would have fit right in as being a Make America Great Again, kind of current-day Trump Republican.
Definitely. You put this guy in a MAGA hat, and, he could make this movie today.
Yeah, and I think what his, playing alternate universe here, I think maybe he was going to say that economically Hitler took charge and got them out of their post-Versailles depression type stuff. So I think he would have praised his economics and getting Germany back to work, which is the same thing Time did, making him Man of the Year. People were looking up to him in the lead up to World War II.
They sure were.
Praising it. So I think that's perhaps where he was going with it. And then when it comes to the Holocaust thing, I think he has sort of a point in that why is it the only genocide that really ever gets talked about? And I think Ahmadinejad asked the same question, and he got labeled an anti-Semite Holocaust denier, right? And that's almost like the climate change thing, science denier kind of deal. And I think that while it is a delicate thing to even mention, I think that there are some things about it that are interesting. Like, why don't we hear about other ones? Why is this one the one that is always brought up? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I know I guess a lot of people that are high up in the Jewish communities are touchy about it because they have felt that the entirety of Jewish history has been one of essentially persecution. But if we can't even talk about these things, if we can't even question them without having people jump down your throat and assume you're the worst person in the world, then you've already lost. You've lost any kind of hope for any kind of rational discourse. You're just going to push unpopular ideas underground. You're not going to satisfy anyone's curiosity. It's just going to lead to bad things.
Yeah, and if it's a rational question, it deserves a rational response, right? And this dives right into my next point, in that because they have a history, that their peoples have been persecuted in history, and it's well recorded or well known, that they have perhaps a chip on their shoulder that other cultures might not, so that when it's brought up, it's a little bit more of an issue, it's more contentious. And that brings me right into the black character, who was going right at the Paxton character with, I just want to be master. Oh, didn't you know I'm a professional basketball player? He's basically saying to him, he's goading him into reacting. He's basically calling him a racist without saying it.
Yep, sure was.
To try to get a reaction. And that really pissed me off.
Yeah, I mean, that guy's a dick the whole movie.
Yeah, and it wasn't until after that he started giving it back to him. And I don't know if he said something about, if we'd known you would have been in so much trouble, we would have just picked the damn cotton ourselves. I don't think he makes that statement unless he's already been dished all this shit. You know what I mean?
Right. No, it definitely escalates. And yeah, if you're first of all, you're invited into this people's home and you're served a meal, you're generally going to be fairly respectful, generally. So yeah, these people, we don't get a all we get is the start of this argument. We don't get the start of any of the other people saying what they say, so we don't know the lead up to any of the other reasons that they kill people. But yeah, if they're all similar, these people are all goaded into saying like the most fringe thing they believe, and then they're like, ha-ha, gotcha, bitch, kill them. Then yeah, it's all just like one big setup. Because I can't really see, it's the first time you're in somebody's home, and yeah, they claim to say, oh, we invite people over to have interesting conversations. Still, I don't see you're just going to go, yeah, I think we should gas all the Jews. It just doesn't just come out of the blue. And yeah, we're not given the lead up to any of the other kills. So if they're all like the first one, then how these people lie to themselves and think that they're doing this great thing by killing all these Hitlers, it's that's where the movie really falls down for me. I mean, essentially the movie is like a kind of trying to be a character study, like, hey, what if kind of scenario. This is an interesting idea, not really a movie. But we're talking about Robert here, but I think most people would agree with this. I need to be able to identify with the protagonist or the protagonists in this situation. In this movie, the protagonists are the people murdering people whose ideas they disagree with. I didn't find a single character in this movie likable. I hated every single one of them, even the ones that were pushing back a little bit against the gung-ho one. I mean, a couple of the girls were like, oh, I don't want any part of this. Oh, you're just a murderer, blah, blah, blah. I'm not even going to, listen to this. I'm not going to be a party to this. You guys are crazy. But then they get on board eventually. And I'm sorry. If I got a bunch of friends who want to murder people they disagree with in a dinner party, I'm out. Or I'm stopping you. I thought every single character in this movie was a piece of shit. And if I can't emotionally connect with anybody in the movie, then I'm just like, well, who cares what happens? The only thing that kept my interest was, what stupid thing will these idiots kill another human being for next? That's the only thing that kept me sticking around.
Yeah, I agree with that. I want to just segue back to my original point about the chip on the shoulder thing, and the guy's name is Luke. I think that he was using the victim, not the mentality, but like you're told your whole life that historically you've been oppressed and repressed and everyone's against you. And so Luke, was the ringleader in this because he wanted to get one over on who he thought were the evil people that were perpetuating this system of racial and oppressive behavior. And so he was the most gung-ho about it. But I don't think that happens if he's not told, you know what I mean? Like if you're told repeatedly, like, hey, you're being treated worse and these are the people doing it to you, yeah, you're not going to like those people very much, right?
Oh, yeah. At one point during the movie, they talked about, what if you could, kill, all these conservatives early before they go on to do horrible things. And the only reason the world's not a great place is because people like us aren't in charge.
Yeah, exactly. And, dude, right when that happened, I'm like, oh, here we go. Central planners, socialist central planners, thinking that they got all the solutions. They're the technocrats, and they've got the intellectual capacity and scientific knowledge to figure it all out. And those are the worst atrocities that happen.
Yeah, those are the worst, is when you got some idea of a world, of how to make a world better. I mean, what do you think Hitler did? He was a central planner who wanted to make the world a better place. That's what he was trying to do. That's what Stalin did. That's what Mao did. That's what Pol Pot did. Ceausescu. All these people. Or at least it was always sold as they were trying to make the world a better place for their people. They were trying to get rid of the Jews and the gypsies and the homosexuals and the mentally deficient and make a 1,000-year Reich for their people. And, man, the world's going to be a better place. So how are these people any different than that, with that same mentality? They have the same mentality as the people they're vilifying. I mean, they're vilifying them rightfully so, but the fact that they can't see it in their own action until the very end of the movie, and not even at the very end of the movie. At the very end of the movie, when Ron Perlman basically spells it out, oh, yeah, you should have just, tried to talk to him. Then they're kind of like, oh, yeah, I guess you're right.
You intellectuals.
Yeah.
Isn't that what you're supposed to be good at?
Right.
Yeah.
So let me talk just real quick about how this kind of movie plays off of, in Game of Thrones with the Red Wedding. This essentially violates guest right. Well, that movie, or that story, was brought out from history. So back in Scotland, I think in the 15 or 1600s, whatever it was, there's a thing called the Black Dinner. And it was the reverse of this, where the guests actually killed the host. But they were like soldiers who were staying with some guests for like a week before they finally killed them at the end of the week. But this is just like a similar situation where you're violating essentially guest right. So that's even more atrocious that you would invite somebody into your home under the auspices of having a nice meal and conversation, and then you would turn around and murder them. I mean, it's so deceptive. And then they even come to this disgusting thing where they're like, oh, but what if we act horrified when they're choking and dying to death? So then their last thoughts aren't terrible. these sick psychopaths. And these are our protagonists. Anyway.
Yeah. And I wanted to bring up, and I still want to get back to the self-defense thing because they do stab him in the back.
Yes.
And, that's super questionable. But one of the lines they bring up is they're not people, they're people that hate. So not only are they dehumanizing them, but they're like breaking their own argument in the very next sentence. They're not people, they're people that hate. So they are people.
So they are people, and guess what? The protagonists in this movie are also people who hate. They are intolerant. They hate people with different ideas. It's not like, okay, and every one of these people, except for the Bill Paxton character who apparently had killed a little girl, but they didn't know that at the time. But everybody else, if you're going to commit a crime, you need the idea, and then you need the ability to carry it out. Is their argument, these protagonists, seriously, that these people were going to have the ability to carry out, these things which they agreed with that were so terrible or advocated or whatever? Like at one point, the pastor who's like, well, I'm going to buy an island, wasn't it? Something like this. He's going to buy an island, and he was going to put all the homosexuals on this island. In what reality or universe is this old pastor guy going to get the resources and the military power to round up all the homosexuals and deport them to an island? What fantasy land does this exactly take place in? So they couldn't be really worried that this was actually going to occur. All they were doing was killing people whom they disagreed with. Not that they were actually worried that they were ever really going to do anything. So their entire bullshit ex post facto justification was just complete horseshit.
Yeah, I'll give you that. And most of it was just they had a different opinion. And honestly, many of the people that were the quote-unquote conservative evil people, I found some merit in some of their arguments. Like the Mark Harmon character was simply saying that not every claim of rape is a legitimate rape. And we've seen that with the Duke Lacrosse thing. And, even the mere accusation is enough to ruin somebody's career or, a whole bunch of other issues. And I'm not apologizing for the situation, but I just think that it should be an accusation should carry some weight if it is a false accusation, like as a repercussion against the person who makes the accusation.
I would agree with that, sure. Yeah, you are absolutely ruining a person's character by saying that. And, I mean, whatever happened to innocent until proven guilty? It seems to have been thrown out the window.
Yeah, and I want to be careful to draw a line here because I'm not sure how, totally consistent that is. But, because libel is kind of a thing, but someone's opinion of you, you don't own that. So there's no property right in that. But
True.
To essentially have a monopoly justice provider be directed at you, weaponized at you, for a false accusation, I would amount that to almost an attempted murder.
Well, yeah, not only that, but yeah, you are forced to defend yourself against, a false accusation, right? So someone's just making it up out of whole cloth, or they don't like you, or they rejected your advances, or for whatever reason. And especially in this monopoly service provider, like you mentioned, it's incredibly expensive to defend yourself, which is essentially accounts to theft, a huge expense, could ruin you. Anyway, do you have more to say about that? Because then they also try to kill a high school girl who just has a different opinion on a book. Yeah,
that one was interesting because she just doesn't like that book.
She didn't like Catcher in the Rye, so they're going to murder her? Are you? And then, okay, can I go into a little bit of a rant about the reality of this world?
Go for it.
Okay, so in the beginning, they say that they are killing one person a week. They invite one person over per week to have this dinner. They end up killing 10 people. So 10 weeks go by. Is nobody telling anybody where they're going for dinner? Nobody misses these people? This movie isn't taking place on a stage. It takes place in a house where they go out and show events in the town. They show the sheriff and it takes place in a world. So we're given a real world scenario. And the whole time I'm going, does nobody miss these people? Why aren't there cops showing up the next day? Hey, this person was last seen going to this house for dinner. Did you see him? What happened? Where did he leave? And then it happens again and again and again. And eventually your excuses of, oh, yeah, he left, but he was kind of drunk. Who knows? Maybe he got away, crashed somewhere. I don't know. Eventually those excuses wear thin. And, yeah, so that was another thing that bugged me.
Yeah, and I think they try to cover that with the first one. They're like, oh, he travels cross country and no one's really going to miss him, that kind of a thing. And let's go stash his truck, miles away from here. But you're right.
Yeah, but that's it.
Yeah, when it gets into everyone else, they're all like local within the community as far as I'm aware. And yeah, you're right. I mean, but again, you are dealing with a monopoly justice provider who doesn't have any real incentive to provide quality service. So maybe you get by a little bit, but not 10.
Well, we at the very end of the movie, we get a newspaper that says, 10 people missing or whatever. But really, after 2.5 months, you get one newspaper article. I mean, if my loved one or even a rando family member that even I don't even really like too much all of a sudden disappeared, I'd go, where was he last going? Who did he last see? Who did he last talk to? What was he doing? Oh, he was having dinner with some people that he never knew before. Well, I'm going to go talk to them. So that I know you're supposed to suspend disbelief for a movie, and I think you can, if you like this kind of movie, you can enjoy it. But for me, this stuck in my craw. Maybe because I didn't like the movie anyway, and then I was looking for reasons to hate it, because I understand it's a character study, and you just want to be able to show the descent of these characters going farther and farther, and how easy it is to solve your problems with violence and murder. So from that aspect, I think you can still enjoy it. But for me, it was bugging me.
Yeah, and that's to allegedly solve their problems, because they weren't actually making the world a better place. They were making it far worse by committing a bunch of murders. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the George Costanza character, who said he's not anti-Earth, he's just pro-human. And it's funny because they murdered him as a result of this, but environmentalists, at their core, if you take it to their logical conclusion, they are virulently anti-human.
If an environmentalist has to make a decision between a human and the environment, they'll pick the environment. So yeah, I mean, ideally, I think they want them both to cohabitate in harmony. But if they're given the choice where there's like a polluter or someone kind of like damaging the environment, they're like, fuck that guy. Even if that person is just trying to like feed their family and shit.
Well, yeah, and you see it with the people who push the climate change idea, and that government is the solution to that, and so they want to raise the price of pollution and of polluting like fossil fuels and things like that. Meanwhile, billions of people living on the margins of life, just scraping by at the current level of pricing for these inputs to create energy, to provide heat and food and other such things. If you artificially interfere with that and raise the price of those things or outlaw them altogether, you are going to kill millions of people. I mean, they talk about Hitler in this. I mean, you're literally Hitler. When it comes down to it. So I don't know. I find it very interesting, all of these issues. Now you mentioned, if we can shift topic a little bit, character studies. I found that the characters were not consistent in how I would have expected them to develop. Like at first, the Annabeth Gish character, she's like against this thing. But then when she's on board, she's like way on board. Like she's pushing for it more so than some of the other ones, right? Like her boyfriend is the one who first stabbed Zach in the back, and he was like kind of justifying it in a way because he didn't want to go to jail, and he's like, oh, we're actually doing some good, but then it starts to eat away at him, and then their relationship starts to split up because of that, because he's having all these second thoughts and this guilt. Meanwhile, she's like super like bloodlust, and I couldn't figure out the Cameron Diaz because she was back and forth. Like she was for it, and then she was kind of against it, and she's the one who ended up saving that high school girl, walking her out.
Right.
And the nerdy dude who gets his arm broken, like he gets like super into it, and he goes out shooting skeet, and then he shoots a pheasant, and he's like, "Get some, yeah," like he's a fucking tough guy now. Yeah.
This is really. I mean, I think they were getting off on it. They were getting off on having the power of life and death in their hands, and I don't know, man. I think it was fairly accurate in a lot of senses. Although I think the movie kind of went for comedy almost. I mean, I didn't laugh at any point in the movie, but there were times when they were killing off people, like during that montage sort of thing where it's just one person after another, where they were just like gleefully giving them like the juice, and like everybody was looking at them like expectantly and like smiling and laughing and just having a grand old time. Just isn't murder fun, boys and girls? Look at this person. there was never, I think, there was never really a moment where, until the very end, where any of the characters really said anything that they agreed with, which would have been a little more interesting if, they said a bunch of weird things, things they didn't agree with, and they're like, oh, we're going to kill this guy. Then he said something that they agree with, like some sort of lefty type thing, and then went back, and so they had, if there was any kind of like conflict, because you're right, they did have the conflict, but it seemed kind of out of place. Like, I'm not really sure why you're wishy-washy back and forth on this. If they had actually had reasons to be that way, I think it would have been more effective.
Yeah, I think perhaps they ran out of time, because this movie already felt like it ran long.
Yeah, it was only an hour and a half, but it was long.
Yeah, it just kind of drags on. And here's another weird thing about it, is it's set up like this dark comedy, like you were saying, but then there's this little bit of a backstory of the sheriff investigating them and the missing girl and all this stuff. And like 3/4 of the way through the movie, that just ends because she hops the fence and steals a tomato. So she conducts an illegal search, is trespassing, and steals. And then Luke just whacks her with a shovel and kills her. But that just ends like that whole arc right there. And I thought that was kind of weird. It was, I don't know if that was perhaps an intentional thing to like shock a little bit, but I don't know if I was a big fan of that. It felt out of place. What are your thoughts on that?
Was it a satisfactory conclusion to that? Probably not. But I wasn't satisfied by really anything in this movie, so I really can't say. It wasn't like the movie was going along great for me, and then this thing seemed out of place in such a wonderful movie. I thought it was all pretty much a crap fest. Not that I don't think that there are nuggets of things to be gleaned from this. I just didn't think it worked too well as an actual movie. But as a discussion piece, I think it's really good. I think it's a perfect episode for us. But as far as a satisfying conclusion to that story, yeah, it was rather abrupt. But I thought the whole movie ended abruptly. Like, the Ron Perlman character comes in and then kills them all? Or does he? Yes, he does. Or does he? I don't know. And then he goes on to be a presidential candidate. So he was telling them a lie? So they were doing a good thing? Or weren't they? I mean, I kind of like ambiguous endings, but maybe in a better movie I would have liked it more. I don't know. What did you think of the ending?
I do agree. It was abrupt, and that the Ron Perlman, I mean, yeah, they pepper him in throughout the movie a little bit in the TV appearances, and then he's like the big fish, right? He's the literally Hitler guy that they want to get, and they just know right away that they're going to kill him. But, at the same time, when they invited like a neo-Nazi to the table, they didn't even wait for dinner, right? That was like one of the comments I made, like, yeah, why waste the food, because they already knew they were going to kill him. And I would have thought that they would have already known they were going to kill this guy. So that didn't seem super consistent as far as what they were doing. But it was a level of, it took a lower and lower bar of offense to have them be murdered, and they make a comment that the food they're serving is lesser and lesser quality, like they're just ordering Chinese food or just pizza or something like that. So I think that they let it kind of take over for what they were doing, and they definitely had devolved from actually having any level of conversation or debate with these people and just looking for that reason to kill them. It's like they had that sentence of death in their pocket already.
For sure. Let me go off on a little rant here. I'm sure you'll have some things to say about this, but one point, Cameron Diaz makes a really telling line. She makes a really telling statement. I think they're reflecting on the Bill Paxton kill, and they're saying, we don't really ever do anything. All we do is protest and decide what to buy or something like that, and we buy like vegan or vegetarian or something like that. Do you remember this line where she's talking about how all they do is blah, blah, blah?
Right. And then, not to derail you too much, but then they talk about how it wouldn't be great if the world was run by people like us because we all get along, we don't fight. And then they started fighting like immediately right there.
Right. Okay, so I wanted to make a point that, I think what transformed me from being a lefty to an anarchist was, learning economics, essentially, and, my own morality ideas, self-ownership. That's not my idea, but you know what I'm saying. So if this whole movie is about these lefties taking power and downplaying their own actual power, consumer choices, which she poo-poos, and I don't remember the exact quote, but that's what she does. She poo-poos the fact that all they do is make consumer choices, as if that is like nothing. That is huge. How you decide to spend your money molds the world into the image that you want it to be, in a voluntary, peaceful way. But they don't realize they're doing that. They think that since there's so many other people also making consumer choices, it's not it's not good because you're being like counteracted by somebody who's making other like different choices or something like that. But consumer choices are incredibly powerful. You have in order for a corporation or any kind of a company to, rule the world or to dominate a market, they have to provide such an amazing service that everybody wants their product, will voluntarily trade their dollars for their product, that they value the product more than they value their dollars. So they have to provide a wonderful service or a product. And you have to appreciate that no matter who you are, for what reason you want it. It could because it's gluten-free or because it's GMO-free or because it's vegan or whatever. And you put your dollars towards that thing, you vote with your dollars, you are asking the world to be more like that. And there are companies who will want those dollars, and they will create more of that product for you to consume and enjoy, and therefore making the world more like what you want. And so these powerless lefty things just don't even realize their own power, and it leads to this frustration and this feelings of impotence, and it leads to these people and these characters in this movie to murder people, to overcompensate when they had the power all along, and they never realize it at the end. They never learned that lesson.
Yeah, in fact, they stray further from that lesson, just like you were saying. And I don't know if we mentioned this earlier, but when you were talking about comparing them to the Maos and the Pol Pots and those of those ilk, they're just a smaller scale, right? But to relay into your point, I think that they're taking what they view as a zero-sum game in the market when it is in fact not. It's mutually beneficial trade, and that's the reason why people do trade, and that's why things actually get better. Both parties are satisfied in the ex ante like they expect to. I mean, people do make wrong decisions. Everything is entrepreneurial risk, but on net, it's an improvement in most people's situations when they make that trade. And they eschew that and try to get more into the political realm of an actual zero-sum game, where if you vote for the other guy or the other girl or whatever, I don't even know is gender even a thing anymore, but if your person doesn't win, then you're screwed, right? Whereas in the market, it's different strokes for different folks. It's people trying to provide goods and services to you in the hopes that they'll be able to profitably sell it, and like you said, if you find something you like and you buy it, that is a signal that you want more of it created, more of it brought into this world. And so you're exactly right.
And it's a win-win. Everybody wins. We all get wealthier and wealthier. Yeah.
All right. So what do you think of the sheriff hopping the fence? Because that did upset me.
Well, wait a minute. Let's talk about any kind of questionable things. We promised to talk about the first murder, and we haven't really done it yet. Did you think that was a justifiable self-defense, coming to the defense of another, even though it was a stab in the back? Because he did have at that point, did he have the knife to his throat, and then he also had the arm twisted behind the back? Or was it just the arm twisted behind the back? I don't remember.
Yeah, it's hard to remember, but I know that the threats that he had made initially, and he put the knife to the one guy's throat and then said he was going to rape the girl.
Right.
I could tell that he wasn't being serious, but I can imagine in the situation viewing it far differently.
Yeah, well, doesn't he make it at the very beginning? He's like, "Calm down, I'm making a point." Didn't he say that? Now, actions speak louder than words, and he very easily could have harmed somebody. But it's also kind of a weird, strange thing to go into somebody's house, and even though you're being insulted, usually a normal person would just leave. But it's another thing to start killing people when you're vastly outnumbered. Now, he obviously didn't find them particularly physically threatening, nor should he. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it was legitimate self-defense or no?
I want to say no in the totality of the events. I want to say that because the action of defense was not initiated during the ambiguous situation of he's threatening the life of one of them, not in a serious way, but they don't know that, and he says he's going to rape the woman, but they don't know that's not serious. But that had passed, right? And then he gets a knife to his throat by the nerd guy. And it's during that the Paxton character actually does defend himself, but
right.
And it seemed as if it was accidental that he broke his arm, like he slipped or something, like he was like trying to apologize for it, and then he got stabbed in the back.
Yeah, I mean, for me watching it, I would say that it was more murder and less self-defense. If I was actually one of those people at the party, I probably would have been more along the lines of self-defense. But altogether, I'm sure there's some blame on both sides. I mean, somebody pulls out a knife, even if you're trying to make some kind of a point, trying to educate these college liberals that that the world is not all what they think it is or whatever. You don't necessarily need to threaten their lives Yeah, I'll say there's fault to go around, but I think I'll lead more towards murder. But I'm not 100% sold either way. I could probably be convinced either way.
Yeah, and I think they had to shoot it so it was somewhat ambiguous. You know, they had to make it like an accidental arm break and mid-apology stab, you know, so it really wasn't clear what had happened. So,
right.
Yeah, and like you said, I think had I been there, I would have been like, okay, that was self-defense. But watching it, I'm like, no, they murdered that guy.
Right. And then, yeah, I definitely felt, especially in the aftermath of that killing, it seemed like a whole lot of ex post facto justification. Like, even if it was murder, we did a great thing. We're heroes. That sort of talk.
Hooray for us.
Yeah, we're the best. Now, as to the trespass, you don't think she had probable cause? It's possible. I think that, this is one of those questions where I don't know what it would look like in a private property-based society, what it would look like, what a law enforcer type person would be able to do exactly. She definitely suspected that they had something to do with something. They thought they were acting suspicious. Because this is after she goes to the door, right? This is after she interviews the one guy at the police station, and he looks at the Bill Paxton picture a little bit long, and she notices that. And then she goes to the house, and then the three of them are acting weird and funny. And, oh, by the way, they just murdered somebody, stabbed him in the back. And then there's, like, comically trying to get the knife out of the back, and that was not funny. That just seemed horrific to me. Anyway. So I thought that the cop was doing some pretty good police work, and that if I was some sort of private property cop person investigating murders in the town, and I got these people acting really suspicious, and then they got some human-sized mounds in their backyard, I'd probably take a closer look. Now, should she have gotten a warrant? Does that even make it okay? I mean, if they all agree, if this is a voluntary society and they've all agreed that, this certain judge-type person can issue these warrant-type things, I would be happier with it. But she's got, 10 people that have been murdered in her town. Not to say that that's going to allow her to violate people's property willy-nilly. I think she would definitely need to have probable cause. So, if it bugged you, though, give me your reasons why it bugged you.
Well, for me, it didn't seem like it was clear that she had overheard everything that was being said, or that there was a reason that she was back there in the first place. And hopping over the fence, I don't think really accomplishes much other than what was tantamount to an illegal search and trespassing, in my mind. And then she gets caught, and of course, she can read it on Luke's face, and he knows. So
yeah.
Now, in his instance, it almost is an act of self-defense, right? In a weird way, because he knows if he doesn't do that right then it's all coming down.
And rightfully so.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, murderers who don't want to get caught. It's true. Psychopathic murderers don't want to get caught. Why would you want to get caught? So yeah, he had to add another body to the pile. What's it to him? I mean, he's killing people for not liking To Kill a Mockingbird, what was it?
Catcher in the Rye.
Catcher in the Rye. So what does he care? Another body.
Yeah.
In fact, the other people in the house were upset when they heard, you killed a cop? You were just killing people for having the wrong opinion. Why is it killing a cop? It seemed like they were just upsetting about getting caught, not that they had killed anybody because they were worried that they agreed with them or not.
Yeah, it's almost like in Grand Theft Auto, you get like a number of stars of how hard the police are going to search for you. And so these guys were, killing like conservative types and quote-unquote evil people, and they were just getting like a couple of stars.
Right.
But as soon as they killed the cop, it's like, all
yeah, in Grand Theft Auto, you can run over like 20 prostitutes, and then, you kill one cop, and all of a sudden they'll be on you. It's true. Just like real life. Yeah. Allegedly.
We wouldn't know, don't want to know.
So I've heard.
So two other things, and then we can wind this one down. I wanted to ask you, because the Hitler question, I think, is one of those almost trolley problem things that you hear about in people trying to have philosophical stumpers,
Right, sure.
And I want to say that Perlman handled it really well.
Yeah, he did. That's the winning answer. That is the libertarian answer. Because, if you don't think you can convince somebody with your ideas, then you must not be convinced that you have the right ideas. If you are resorting to murder to, quote, create a better world, to, quote, get rid of people you can't convince, well, then you must not be really convinced that your arguments are convincing. So, right, then try and convince Hitler.
I will say that there was a period in my transition from left-leaning liberal to full-on Rothbardian ANCAP, where I knew something wasn't right in the world, but I couldn't put meat on those bones. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I knew something wasn't right, but I couldn't tell you why. Now I can, I think.
You had the base Barbie doll, but you didn't have all the outfits.
Right, yeah, and the Corvette.
Or the dream house.
So I just want to quibble with you there, because until you actually have the meat on those bones, then being able to convince another is rather difficult.
Well, these people were absolutely convinced that they had the right answers.
That's true, yeah.
Even though they didn't. I don't think they did. But by murdering people that they disagreed with, they were in a sense confessing that they actually didn't have the answers. Or that they think that certain people are not logical or cannot be convinced at all. Like, people are just purely, I don't know, beyond any kind of reason.
Well, then they actually have the age-old answer that every socialist runs into eventually, and that is those that cannot be convinced must be eliminated.
That's the way to do it, baby. Booyah. Just make a killing field. You can fit so many bodies in a big hole. Let me tell you. You just shoot them and you push them in.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more on Perlman, and then let's wind this one down. So I really enjoyed Perlman's answers to pretty much everything in there, and he is exactly right when they talk about his supporters, because Kathy Newman tried to do this to Jordan Peterson in a famous interview recently, where they were trying to say, oh, you're followed by the alt-right and a bunch of young men on the internet making, like, terrible comments. And he gave a similar answer to Perlman here, and he says, well, I can't be blamed for what my supporters believe or what they do. People are going to do what they're going to do. All we can really do is be the best individual selves that we can. And that's like Jordan Peterson right there.
Yep, sure is. So let me ask you this, Daniel. Which character in this movie is speaking in the director's voice, in the writer's voice? Is it Perlman? You think that this is the commentary of this movie? Kind of seems to be, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it is hard to say. And I also want to transport my own self back to when I first saw this movie when I was left-leaning, because I did think at the time, I enjoyed this movie a lot at the time. And, in fact, we watched it twice, me and some of my college buddies. And you weren't there, but you were one of my college buddies as well. But we go way further back than that. But I felt at the time like it was sort of almost viewed as a be careful what you try to use to accomplish what you think is right kind of thing back then, because I more agreed with these left liberal types.
Right.
Whereas now I just see them almost instantly as the monsters. I
would hope so. But yeah, I know what you mean. If I had watched this back when it first came out, I would have more identified with these people, but seen that I still believe that they were obviously taking it way too far, that this is not the way that you make the world a better place. You convince people with your ideas. So I would have been some sort of amalgamation between their views. Because they do have good views on things, right? I mean, who cares if you're a homosexual or not? Whatever. I don't give a shit. You know, if you want to smoke some dope, who cares? Why does it matter?
Well, to that point, that's 1990s liberal. Like, yes. Now they're homosexual or bi or whatever, you know, like there's 75 genders and orientations. If you don't use hate speech. Yeah. If you don't use it exactly how they desire it, then it's hate speech. I mean, that's
we're going to throw you in jail.
Yeah. So it's definitely evolved into a much more dangerous situation versus what seemed to be their opinion in this movie of live and let live. You know. Right. Yeah. I don't know if this is the natural evolution, but they seem to be more kind of care-hardy type liberal dummies than like, you know, hardcore Marxists or something like that. They seem to be like, you know, kind of like educated, you know, elite liberal type people. I mean, one guy was getting his master's in painting. And I'm just going to be master. Oh, man. All right. Well, one last point, and then let's wind this one down. I did find it ironic that who I imagine would be an anti-gun leftist uses a gun at the end to try to solve his problem. Who's that? Luke. He has the sheriff's gun, and he points. Oh, yeah, in the kitchen. Right. Yeah, he's going to shoot Cameron Diaz. Yeah. It's some sweet hypocrisy there, man. You know, guns solve problems except when they're in other people's hands. I don't know. Yep. Well, let's wind this one down and start doing our final summary and review. I know that we have toyed with the idea of introducing some categories, and we've done, you know, tears jerked in the past couple of shows. And I do think that we do need to get hard and fast about having such categories and sticking to them, because we didn't do that at all this episode. Kind of okay with it just because we had so much to talk about, like just naturally and organically. But I think I want to introduce more fixed type categories going forward, if you're cool with that. Yeah, absolutely, man. All right. Well, I almost don't even have any suspense. What's your final summary and review and your rating, sir?
Well, first of all, zero tears jerked. It befuddles me. It's a weird choice if you're going to tell a story and you're going to say, okay, these are my main characters. You're going to hate every single one of them. Now, maybe they were kind of writing it from that lefty liberal, but seeing the, kind of seeing both sides angle of the Ron Perlman character. Maybe they did sympathize with these characters, or at least the beliefs of the characters, but just how, they're so hypocritical the whole time. They're such absolute disgusting monsters that I hated them the entire time, and I didn't care anything that would happen to them. I would have kept hoping for the kitchen scene to happen way earlier and for them to start killing each other. That's what I was hoping for. I wanted it to devolve into one was going to go to the cops earlier, so he had to kill her, and then, oh my God, you killed my girlfriend, I'm going to kill you, and then it eventually wears down until there's just one guy left, or maybe there's like a double kill at the very end or something like that. That's how I kind of wanted it to end. But I did enjoy the Perlman character coming in and kind of like schooling these dummies at the end. I did appreciate that. That said, man, what a weird choice to have hateable protagonists. just absolute hateable. To make a movie about characters I don't emotionally identify with or even intellectually identify with in any real way, just instantly took me out of the movie, and I didn't appreciate it at all. So this is like I'm torn because it was a really good fodder movie to talk about. But do I recommend this? No. Unless you're like really dissecting it to like talk about it like we were doing, like with your friends or somebody. But no, this is like a 3. This is just I was disappointed and hated the characters the whole time, and then it didn't end satisfactorily for me because I wanted them all to die by their own hand to really kind of show some sort of like a Lord of the Flies type situation, as opposed to Perlman coming in and killing them in some sort of heroic / not heroic way, because it just kind of ruins the whole thing. With Perlman killing them, does that justify what they were doing? Because then he goes on to run for president or insinuate that he's going to. So are they the heroes? Is the audience supposed to believe that these monsters were really doing the right thing by trying to kill teenagers? What are you trying to tell me, movie? And scene. Daniel?
All right, well said. And I do have a question for you, because if Perlman was running for president, and I think it's a little bit ambiguous at the end because he sort of says, well, I already have the power, and that's by being in media. But right. Why are you saying that would have been justifying their behavior? Because Perlman wasn't this evil dude until he murdered them, but he was sort of doing it in self-defense and sort of like, oh, I know, I put the puzzles pieces together, and I know that they are guilty of murdering at least 10 or 11 people.
Well, because it makes the black guy right. That he's saying, like, no, this guy's just giving us canned responses. This guy is literally Hitler. He's just saying he's not going to run for president, that he has no lust for power. So we need to kill him. But then he kills them, and then he goes on to do the thing at which he said he wasn't going to do. So he was lying during that whole speech where he's basically telling them what he told them.
Yeah,
that's how I read it.
I didn't read it like that. I read it as he could run for president, but he already has all this power behind the microphone and being a spokesperson in the media. So why would he settle for a lesser power?
What's with that? What's with the final scene then, where he's standing there with the painting of him standing over the dead body, where he's talking about running for president?
Yeah, he mentions it, and then the next line is, "But I already have more power than that." So that's how I read it. So, but he did lie to them. He did, for sure, because he said, "Oh, don't raid and pour the bad wine." Well, yeah, you did.
Yeah, and he also put together the puzzle pieces like super, super quickly. Like he gets a read on him that they were trying to poison him, and then he picks up the newspaper randomly, and he's like, oh, opens to the right page, and he's like, oh, 10 people missing. Oh,
and then the lightning
10
strikes
body plots and
10 mounds out there in lightning.
He's like connecting the dots like within about 20 seconds. Like, okay.
He's like freaking greatest detective. He's better than Batman there.
Oh, he's Sherlock Holmes plus Batman rolled into one, yeah. You got the Bat computer basically printing out. Yes, they did it.
Yeah, Alfred gets on the horn. Yeah, they're guilty. All right, well, for all those things, yeah, you've actually convinced me in many respects that this movie doesn't hold up as much as I had thought. Now, there is a bit of a cult classicness to this. We mentioned that we were going to do this movie to a friend of ours, Mike C., and he was all excited about it. He wanted to hear our take on it and actually perhaps come on and talk about it on a Boys Night Out episode where we have just more organic conversations with guests. But yeah, I think that there's so much kind of lacking in the movie making craft that I'm a little bit viewing it in a lesser light. You mentioned that you gave it a 3 out of 10. Ebert gave it a 3 out of 4, so he gave it a much better rating. And his review, which I shared with you, and maybe we can talk about it for just a moment, it almost appears as if Ebert had some libertarian leanings, because he opens
Definitely.
with, it's satire, but these liberal heroes are arguing about whether they've killed 10 or 11 right-wingers, and when will they realize they're the monsters, that kind of a thing. So I'll post that as a link because I think it's an interesting read. I never really got that vibe from him before, that he might have a bit of a libertarian streak, and perhaps it's just this movie that brings it out. But my overall rating, I'm going to go with a 6 on this thing, just because I really enjoyed it in my younger days, and I didn't like it as much this time, and then after talking to you, I like it even less. But I still think it's an interesting movie and worthy of discussion, right? And it's also almost like a very fortune-telling, like it's Tell Me Now, Miss Cleo kind of thing. Because like these are the people that we're seeing now, 20 years later, but just taking it to extremes.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is basically predicted the future, and then just dial it up like one notch. But you're right. I think this movie, if you're gonna ask me, is this a good discussion movie? Like, how would you rate it as a discussion movie? I'd be like, this is like a 9, because I think this really provokes a lot of interesting discussion. If you're gonna like write a college paper or any kind of like study on a movie, this is a good choice to do because there is a lot to it. But from a casual viewer's perspective, in the standard storytelling method where you want to establish an emotional connection to the audience so that you care about what happens, none of that happened. None of that happened for me. So it falls down on that end.
Yeah, I think they're more interested in getting the concept out versus a really cohesive story.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think that's going to do it for us for The Last Nighters. So this can be found at lastnighters.com/13, show notes and more, and we'll also have a link to the Roger Ebert review of this. And so I just want to say good night from last night.